The convoy is already in motion and already under strain. Dark hulls cut through darker water, each ship holding a position that is slowly slipping out of tolerance. Engines are throttled back, screws turning just fast enough to keep steerage, yet the sea beneath them is alive with noise. Not the clean, distant wash expected at night, but a muddled, overlapping churn that carries too far and returns too quickly. Inside the destroyer's sonar compartment, the environment feels compressed. Heat builds around the equipment racks. The steady vibration of machinery, roughly 180 revolutions per minute, travels through the deck and into the operator's feet. On the sonar display, the soundscape refuses to settle. Static surges appear without warning. Echoes bloom, overlap, then vanish before they can be classified. Returns occupy the same bearings where doctrine insists only empty water should exist. Depth charges have already been armed twice. Both times, the process stops short of release. Each false contact forces the escort screen to react. Small course changes, minor speed adjustments, that compound into something larger. Fuel is burned unnecessarily. Wake noise increases. Spacing begins to collapse. Ships that should be holding 900 yards drift inward toward 600, tightening the formation and amplifying the very acoustic interference sonar is meant to resolve. The manuals attribute this kind of confusion to error, poor calibration, inattentive operators, or faulty equipment. They do not account for the water itself behaving differently. The temperature profile taken earlier shows a sharp gradient, nearly 4 degrees Celsius separating layers. But the procedure card dismisses such effects at this depth as negligible. According to doctrine, what the screen is showing cannot be real. A junior sonar operator notices something that does not conform even to the chaos. One contact persists. It holds its return for approximately 6 seconds longer than the surrounding noise. Instead of fading with distance, its range appears to compress, sliding inward on the display. It survives resets that clear other artifacts. It shifts slightly with course changes, but never scatters. Standard procedure is clear the trace, restore baseline gain, report uncertainty. Doing nothing is the safest course. Acting carries risk, misidentification, wasted ordnance, consequences that follow mistakes at sea. Outside, another ship alters course to avoid a contact that may not exist. The formation tightens again. Collision risk increases. The system designed to protect the convoy is now destabilizing it, one false signal at a time. No orders come down from above. No explanation follows. The failure is not approaching. It is already underway. The distortion does not stabilize. It propagates. On the sonar display, returns begin to layer on top of one another, stacking vertically as if the sea itself has fractured into moving strata. What should be a single contact appears at multiple apparent depths, each echo briefly convincing before collapsing into the next. None of them persist long enough to classify. None of them disappear cleanly enough to dismiss. Across the convoy screen, the reactions diverge. One escort reduces speed to 12 knots, attempting to quiet its screws and regain clarity. Another accelerates past 18, braking laterally to clear what it interprets as a closing contact. These decisions are made independently, based on shared data that no longer shares a common meaning. The geometry of the screen unravels. Spacing becomes uneven. Noise fields overlap, raising the acoustic baseline with every corrective maneuver. Inside the sonar compartment, the junior operator pulls temperature logs taken earlier in the night. They were recorded routinely, without emphasis, and largely ignored. Now they define the problem. At approximately 27 meters, the water temperature drops sharply, a thermocline, thin, abrupt, and well within operational depth. Sound does not pass through it cleanly. It bends. Across that boundary, sonar pulses refract upward, returning early and compressed. Ranges shorten artificially. Bearings smear. The effect produces multiple ghost contacts from a single source. Doctrine assumes gradual gradients that average out over distance. This layer does not behave that way. It is sharp enough to trap sound, narrow enough to be dismissed. Standard operating procedure forbids altering gain curves during active convoy operations. Uniform settings are meant to preserve shared interpretation. Deviations introduce uncertainty into a system built on consistency. But consistency has already collapsed. Each sweep now carries delay, nearly 4 seconds between pulse and actionable display. That latency compounds as ships maneuver, forcing operators to work with information already outdated. At convoy speed, a submerged contact can shift dozens of yards in that interval. Meanwhile, the escorts advertise their movements through cavitation and wake noise. If a submarine is present, it now hears everything. The anomalous contact returns again. Same bearing. Slightly altered range, 3 to 5 degrees of drift, consistent across sweeps. Random noise does not behave this way. Thermal distortion alone should scatter the return. It does not. The operator does not speak. There is no doctrinal language for this condition, only prohibitions. He watches the display fill with echoes that contradict one another, and watches the convoy react to all of them at once. Command remains silent. No corrective order arrives. The same failure that began minutes earlier now operates at higher intensity, under worse conditions, with more ships responding to less reliable information. The system is not malfunctioning intermittently. It is repeating its error, faster, louder, and with shrinking margins. The red lamp casts a narrow cone of light across the console, leaving the corners of the compartment in shadow. The junior operator leans closer to the procedure card clipped beside the display, reading it again not for guidance, but for boundaries. The language is precise and unforgiving. Gain adjustment during live convoy operations is prohibited. The justification is printed plainly beneath it. Altered sensitivity risks masking friendly vessels, exaggerating background noise, and generating phantom contacts indistinguishable from real threats. Any deviation is logged automatically. Any deviation is traceable. He looks back to the screen. Phantom contacts are already everywhere. Instead of trusting the system's smoothing filters, he begins to count manually. Sweep by sweep, he times the decay of the anomalous return against the sweep timer, watching how quickly its intensity falls relative to distance. The signal weakens at roughly 1.8 decibels per second. At this range, random noise should attenuate closer to 3.5. The difference is small, easy to dismiss as variance, but it holds steady across multiple passes. Around the convoy, the acoustic environment continues to degrade. Course corrections ripple outward as ships react to conflicting information. Overlapping screws churn the water unevenly, and the combined noise floor climbs by nearly 30% compared to baseline. Under these conditions, default gain settings amplify distortion as efficiently as signal. Sonar is performing exactly as designed, but the assumptions behind that design no longer apply. The manuals assume equilibrium, steady speeds, stable spacing, predictable water layers. None of those conditions exist now. The system is trapped in a feedback loop, reacting to its own artifacts and reinforcing them with every maneuver. On the tactical board, depth charges are set shallow, 15 meters, based on refracted returns that place the contact above the thermocline. If released, the charges would detonate in the upper layer, doing little more than agitating the water with turbulence and bubbles. For several minutes afterward, sonar would be nearly blind. The convoy would be louder, slower, and easier to track. That option remains doctrinally correct. The contact slides laterally across the display, adjusting smoothly with each turn of the ship. It does not scatter like surface noise. It does not vanish like thermal shimmer. Its behavior is consistent with movement, not distortion alone. The operator's awareness narrows. There is no time to consult a superior, no procedure for requesting an exception. The choice compresses into two paths: maintain the setting and allow the system to keep degrading, or alter a single parameter and risk consequences that cannot be undone. He looks again at the gain control. It is not a dramatic lever, just a calibrated adjustment meant to be fixed once operations begin. Changing it would violate procedure. Leaving it untouched now guarantees continued misinterpretation. He reaches for the control slowly, aware of the weight of the movement. This is not defiance. It is arithmetic, signal loss, noise percentage, depth estimation, pointing to a conclusion the rulebook does not allow. Outside, the convoy continues to maneuver, reacting to echoes that may not exist. Inside the compartment, the rules remain unchanged. Only the situation has. The change is almost imperceptible. The gain control is eased back by less than 12%, small enough to avoid drawing attention, large enough to pull the system out of saturation. There is no audible cue, no click or alarm. The machinery hum remains constant, still vibrating through the deck at roughly 180 revolutions per minute. Only the display reacts. Background static collapses inward. What had been a broad, restless field tightens into a thinner band. Random noise loses its dominance. Individual returns sharpen at the edges, no longer bleeding into one another. The screen stops fighting itself. On the next sweep, the anomalous contact separates cleanly from the clutter. Its bearing steadies. The artificial range compression vanishes. Distance behaves like distance again, attenuating gradually instead of sliding inward as if pulled by the display. Two sweeps confirm the change. A third removes any remaining doubt. This is not stacked noise. It is a single moving source. The operator does not announce the adjustment. He does not pause or signal the bridge. He treats the corrected data as if it were always present, feeding the bearing forward in the same neutral cadence as before. The log remains untouched. The gain reduction is not recorded. On paper, nothing has changed. Within two sweeps, less than 10 seconds, the contact resolves further. Range stabilizes at approximately 1,400 yards. Estimated depth places it beyond 40 meters, below the sharp thermal boundary identified earlier. The shallow estimates that drove earlier maneuvering are revealed as artifacts of refraction, not position. Had the depth charges been released at 15 meters, they would have detonated harmlessly above the thermocline. The effect ripples outward, without comment. Escort maneuvers begin to synchronize. Ships that had been accelerating ease back. Others stop turning altogether. Speed converges across the screen, settling at 14 knots. With it, overlapping noise diminishes. Cavitation drops. The acoustic floor falls as the convoy's movement becomes uniform again. Sonar overlap decreases as spacing becomes deliberate rather than reactive. Friendly hulls regain predictable signatures. Each clean return reinforces the correction, dampening the instability that had been feeding on itself minutes earlier. The destroyer passes directly over the contact. Depth charge settings are changed deliberately this time. The shallow configuration is abandoned. Charges are set to 45 meters, deep enough to reach below the thermocline without agitating the upper layer. The pattern selected is sparse. Too many detonations would reintroduce chaos, filling the water column with bubbles that scatter sound indiscriminately. The release is controlled. The ship maintains course and speed. The charges fall away cleanly, detonating beneath the hull in sequence. The water column erupts in muted pressure rather than noise. The sonar display washes out briefly, then recovers in under 6 seconds, far faster than it would have under the earlier configuration. When the screen clears, the contact is gone. No secondary explosion follows. No debris rises. No oil spreads across the surface. There is nothing to confirm success beyond the absence of what had been there before. The operator watches through several more sweeps. Nothing reappears at the original bearing. No echo slides back into place. Outside, the convoy continues on course. Spacing holds. Communication traffic slows. Fuel consumption drops as evasive maneuvers cease. The escort screen resumes the geometry planned hours earlier, as if the interruption never occurred. Inside the compartment, the gain remains reduced for several minutes while stability is confirmed. Only then is it returned to standard, restoring the appearance of full compliance. No one comments. No question is asked. The data now fits doctrine closely enough that doctrine does not challenge it. The system has stopped failing, not because it was acknowledged, but because it was quietly interrupted. A rule was broken without announcement, under conditions where following it would have guaranteed continued collapse. Nothing marks the moment. No record captures it. The convoy moves on, unaware that its survival hinged on a change small enough to evade notice, yet precise enough to realign the entire screen. Waiting next chapter command. 0306 AM, July 11, 1943, Allied convoy route south of Gela. The sea does not signal a conclusion. It simply settles into a quieter pattern. On the sonar display, each sweep resolves cleanly and clears on schedule. The vertical stacking is gone. No returns compress inward. Echoes decay at expected rates and vanish when they should. The baseline stabilizes and remains empty long enough to be trusted. For the first time since the screen tightened, the system behaves as though it recognizes its environment. Outside, the escort formation stretches back toward proper spacing. The adjustment is deliberate, not rushed. Hulls ease apart until the interval approaches 1,000 yards again. Speed normalizes across the screen, converging between 13 and 14 knots. With uniform motion restored, the character of the underwater noise changes. Screw cavitation diminishes. Wake turbulence smooths out. The overall noise floor drops by roughly 25% from its earlier peak. Fuel consumption follows the same curve. Engines no longer surge to chase uncertain bearings. The steady burn replaces wasteful acceleration. Communication traffic thins as well. Short, urgent transmissions give way to long gaps of silence. There is nothing new to report, and nothing unresolved demanding attention. No confirmation is made. The absence of a return is not treated as proof of destruction, only as the removal of a problem. If a submarine had been present, it either withdrew beyond detection or was disabled without leaving a clear signature. There is no kill claim. No debris breaks the surface. No oil sheen spreads across the water to justify a report. Inside the sonar compartment, the operator watches several additional cycles. Recovery time after the depth charge detonation remains under 6 seconds, confirming that the deeper setting avoided excessive turbulence in the upper layer. The thermocline remains intact, still bending sound, but now its effect is anticipated rather than misread. The gain control is returned to its original position. The adjustment is reversed as quietly as it was made. With the environment stabilized, standard settings no longer amplify distortion. The display continues to produce returns that align with doctrinal expectations closely enough to avoid scrutiny. The log reflects nothing unusual. Contact reports list no confirmed engagements. Sonar performance is recorded as normal for prevailing conditions. The brief period of instability is absorbed into routine language, indistinguishable from countless other nights spent guarding slow-moving ships through contested water. The operator says nothing. There is no mechanism for explaining what occurred without also explaining how it was resolved. Silence preserves compliance, and compliance now matches reality well enough to pass. The convoy continues southward. The screen holds. The failure that had threatened to compound itself indefinitely does not return before dawn. Nothing marks the transition from danger to stability. There is no signal to acknowledge that a critical point has passed. The night simply resumes its expected rhythm: steady engines, predictable returns, measured distance between ships. In the official record, the passage remains uneventful. Only the absence of noise suggests otherwise. By mid-morning, the heat has settled into the building. The briefing room smells of paper, ink, and stale smoke. Charts from the previous night are pinned flat across tables, their creases smoothed as if friction alone could erase uncertainty. Officers move through the material methodically, marking times, routes, fuel states. The convoy's transit south of Sicily is addressed briefly, then absorbed into a longer sequence of routine movements. The after-action report is read without emphasis. Sonar performance: satisfactory. No confirmed enemy contacts. Depth charges expended within normal limits. The entry describing the thermocline is reduced to a single line, noted as a minor environmental factor with no operational impact. The language leaves no space for near failures that resolved themselves. Because the convoy arrived intact, the system is judged to have functioned correctly. There is no column for uncertainty that did not result in loss. The structure of the reporting process assumes compliance first and outcome second. Deviations matter only if they produce visible consequences. In this case, they did not. The absence of disaster is treated as proof that doctrine held. Over the following months, changes appear quietly elsewhere. Training circulars are revised, their language adjusted by degrees. Gain modulation is no longer described as absolutely prohibited. It becomes restricted, then discouraged, except under specific conditions. A footnote is added to a technical appendix, referencing sharp thermal gradients between 20 and 30 meters and their effect on sound refraction. No incident is cited. No example is provided. The revisions circulate fleet-wide within 6 to 9 months, presented as clarification rather than correction. No individual is named. No decision is acknowledged. The system adapts while insisting it never needed to. The junior sonar operator is transferred later that year, reassigned to another ship, another watch, another compartment. His record remains unremarkable. There is no commendation and no reprimand. The night south of Sicily does not follow him. It does not appear in his service history, just as it does not appear in doctrine. Officially, the rule he broke still exists. Unofficially, it has been reshaped. The system absorbs the lesson without admitting the flaw that forced it to change. The convoy's passage becomes another quiet line in a long campaign, indistinguishable from dozens of others. History records no crisis, no correction, no moment of failure narrowly avoided. Only a subtle shift in procedure hints that something once went wrong, and that someone, without authority or recognition, acted when inaction would have been fatal.